The bank manager who laughed at Aisha Thompson's worn-out shoes that Tuesday morning had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of a balance inquiry. The left heel gave her away before she reached the counter. A soft, wet slap against the polished marble. Lotcat. Lotcat. Steady as a metronome, marking each step from the glass entrance to the service desk at First Meridian Bank. The sound carried farther than she wanted it to in a space this quiet. She didn't slow down. She kept her chin level and her back straight, the way her mother had taught her to walk into rooms that weren't sure yet whether to let her in. She was 24 years old, a diner server on her day off, wearing a gray zip-up hoodie over her uniform top. Her jeans had a bleach spot near the left knee. The shoes, black flats, secondhand, 3 years old, had started losing their left sole somewhere around August. On marble, they announced her arrival without her permission. The bank smelled like chilled air and neutrality. Dark wood paneling, frosted glass partitions, the silence of people who felt entitled to the space and chose not to use it unless it meant something. A chandelier overhead caught the morning light and scattered it across the floor in pale diamonds. Aisha walked through one of them without looking up. Aisha reached the counter and set down a single item, a balance inquiry form, filled out on the bus ride over, every field completed in neat, careful handwriting. Her other hand held a folded orange envelope, the electric bill, third notice. The woman behind the counter looked up. Victoria Hargrove was 48 years old, 11 years into managing this branch, with a parking spot in her name and opinions about clients she had never once been required to examine. She wore a charcoal blazer with a pearl pin at the collar. Her composure had curdled, slowly, into contempt. She looked at Aisha. She looked at the form. Then, slowly, with the deliberate unhurriedness of someone who had all the time in the world, she reached for the wet wipe dispenser beside her keyboard, tore one open, and used it to pick up the form. Not to clean anything. Not by accident. She held the paper between two gloved fingers, examined it at arm's length, then set it back on the counter as if returning something borrowed from questionable hands. A quiet exhale escaped her. Just one. A soft, dismissive sound through her nose. A snicker, barely audible, but in a lobby this still, it landed. She tilted her chin and spoke in a voice pitched just below the room, but just above private. "We don't handle accounts like this here." Her eyes dropped, unhurried, to Aisha's feet. "You want to check your balance? With those shoes?" Aisha felt the words before she fully understood them. A cold wave, starting at the ears, moving downward. She had been in rooms that didn't want her before. Classrooms, waiting rooms, interviews where the decision had been made before she sat down, and her body had developed its own early warning system for the feeling. A tightening behind the sternum, a subtle shift in how the air tasted. She held her face still. She had practice. "I just need to verify a balance," she said. Even, measured. Victoria reached under the counter. 3 short hisses. A synthetic lavender mist drifted into the space between them. From behind Aisha, a man in a golf shirt leaned toward his wife. His voice was just loud enough to be heard by the people nearest him. "Smells like cheap food." His wife said nothing. She shifted her designer bag closer. Near the east window, Roy, the security guard, took one deliberate step forward. No words. No need. At his desk across the lobby, Tyler Marsh, 23 years old, 4 months into his internship, had been watching since Aisha walked through the door. He looked at the wet wipe. He looked at Victoria's expression. He looked at Roy's repositioning. He reached into his desk drawer, took out his phone, and angled it toward the counter. He pressed record. Then Aisha's phone buzzed. She answered without checking the screen. The face that appeared was round and careful, braids loosening after a few days, dark eyes slightly squinting at the phone the way Lily always squinted when she was working something out. "Mommy." She pressed her cheek against the screen. Are we turning off the lights again tonight? The bank went perfectly still. Aisha's grip tightened around the orange envelope. She looked at her daughter's face. She looked at the form still sitting on the counter, held at a distance. She looked at Victoria, who had already turned back to her keyboard with the slow satisfaction of a woman who had made her point and moved on. Aisha's hand had started to shake. She pressed the envelope flat against her side to steady it. "Baby," she said quietly, "let Mommy handle one thing. I'll call you right back." She ended the call. Something shifted behind her eyes. Not anger. Not yet. Something just before it that had decided not to give way. She had practiced it for years without knowing that was what she was doing. She stood at the counter and waited. "Step to the side, please." Victoria said it without looking up. Aisha moved. The left sole caught the marble on the first step. Lueket. A few heads turned. A man near the rope line shifted his weight and looked at her shoes for a beat too long. A woman in a cream coat pressed her lips together and looked at the ceiling. Near the front entrance, 2 customers murmured, not loudly, not trying to be overheard, making no particular effort not to be. They should have separate branches for people like this. This is why service is slow. Neither looked at Aisha directly. That was the cruelty of it. It addressed the room, not the person, which made it impossible to answer, and even harder to bear. Aisha walked to the waiting chairs along the far wall and sat down. She set the orange envelope on her knee. She folded her hands over it. She looked at the clock, 9:34, and then looked away because watching a clock when you are trying not to fall apart is one of the least useful things a person can do. Her phone screen lit up again. Lily was still in the kitchen, sitting on the floor the way she always sat when something was on her mind. She had found something. "Mommy." She held the phone up with both hands. Between her fingers was a quarter, glinting slightly in the kitchen light. She turned it over. "I found 25 cents. It was by the couch cushion." She looked at the camera with complete seriousness. "Can we get milk?" A 5-year-old holding 25 cents up to a phone screen like she had found buried treasure. The lobby paused, not dramatically, just in the way a space sometimes goes quiet around a sound that doesn't belong in it. Then it resumed. A teller called a name. Someone laughed near the window. The Tuesday morning rhythm of money in motion carried on, indifferent. Aisha smiled at her daughter. She had decided to smile, so she did. And it was not a performance. It was the kind of protection only a mother understands, giving the person you love most the version of you that keeps them from knowing how much you are holding. "Yeah, baby," she said. "We'll get milk. I'll be home soon." She ended the call. Her hand moved without her thinking about it, up to her collarbone, to the thin gold chain and the small cross hanging from it. She pressed it between her thumb and forefinger and held it. It was solid. It was always solid. It had been her mother's. She let go of it slowly. Her gaze shifted from the open, readable expression she had walked in with to something quieter and harder. Not collapse, something just before it that had decided not to give way. She had practiced it for years without knowing that was what she was doing. Her mother, Diane Thompson, had taught it without naming it. Diane had been a home health aide for 20 years. Double shifts when the rent went up, triple when Aisha's father left, which he did when Aisha was 9 on a Thursday morning with a duffel bag and no conversation. He left the closet half empty and the stove on low, and by the time Aisha got home from school, Diane was already making rice like nothing had changed. She never explained what happened. What she did instead was put a note in Aisha's lunchbox every day for the next 3 years. Always the same 2 words, always in her careful, round handwriting. Dignity first. Aisha had kept every one. They lived in a shoebox under her bed, 37 small squares of folded paper, the ink slightly faded now, the creases worn soft. She hadn't opened the box in months. She didn't need to. She had memorized the handwriting the way you memorize the sound of a voice you were afraid of forgetting. When Aisha was 19, Diane was diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer. She died 14 months later on a Wednesday morning in April, with the TV murmuring in the corner and Aisha holding her hand. Her uncle Marcus stood in the doorway, close enough to be present, far enough to let grief have its room. Marcus Reed was Diane's younger brother and the quietest kind of success story. He had grown up in the same neighborhood, gone to college on a partial scholarship, and spent the next 20 years building an investment fund that most of the family couldn't fully explain, but all quietly respected. He wore suits that fit without drawing attention. He called on birthdays. He sent a check when Aisha finished her community college courses. He did not insert himself, but he never disappeared either. Aisha had gotten pregnant with Lily at 21. The father, Darius, was charming and entirely unprepared, and he had communicated this kindly before gradually fading. He sent money twice a year. He was not cruel, he was simply absent, which Aisha had learned was its own kind of loss. Not sharp, just hollow. Lily arrived 6 weeks early, small and furiously loud. Aisha took that as a good sign. She named her after a flower, because her mother had loved flowers, and because she wanted her daughter to have a name that sounded like something growing toward light. She moved them into a studio in Riverfield. Inconvenient bus routes, slow landlord, but hers. She worked the morning shift at Rudy's Diner 4 days a week. She kept a color-coded notebook, red for overdue, yellow for due, green for paid. Most things stayed red or yellow. She tracked it anyway, because knowing exactly where you stood was better than not knowing, even when the numbers weren't good. There was a small dignity in the notebook, in the act of looking, of counting, of refusing to let the numbers become a blur she hid from. Her manager Anton had told her once, out of nowhere, that she was the best server he'd ever had. She'd carried that sentence for 3 weeks. She hadn't realized until he said it how long it had been since someone in a position of authority had offered her something without wanting anything back. 2 weeks ago, she had received a formal letter from First Meridian Bank, a notice asking her to come in and verify her information on an account her mother had opened for her years ago. She had mostly forgotten about it. On her day off, she had finally come. She had not expected anyone here to care about her. That was not bitterness. That was the quiet calibration of a life lived at the edges of institutions that had never once moved to meet her halfway. She sat in the waiting chair, back straight, hands folded, and waited. 20 minutes passed. A man in a sport coat was greeted by name at the counter. A woman with fur-trimmed sleeves bypassed the line entirely. Aisha watched the clock. 9:51. Opened her notebook, looked at the numbers she already knew by heart, and closed it. Victoria had gone into the back twice and returned each time, pausing to glance at Aisha before turning away without acknowledgement. She was making Aisha feel it. That was the point. Elena Vargas, the teller nearest Aisha's chair, had been watching the morning unfold with the careful stillness of someone who noticed everything and filed it away without comment. 6 years at this branch. She knew Victoria's rhythms, the way her chin lifted when she'd already decided something, the way she slowed down around clients she intended to discourage. Elena had told herself, across those 6 years, that staying quiet was not the same as agreeing. She had told herself that so many times the sentence had worn smooth, like a stone handled too often. She watched Victoria approach the counter at 9:58. "Miss Thompson." Aisha stood and walked to the counter. "I've reviewed your account." Victoria's eyes stayed on the screen. "It's flagged with an access restriction I can't override from my position here." A pause. "Where did you first hear about this account?" "I received a letter from the bank." Aisha produced it from her bag, folded into thirds, soft at the creases. Victoria glanced at it without picking it up. "Standard correspondence. It doesn't indicate special status." She folded her hands. Is there another name attached to this account? It was my mother's. She opened it for me. How long ago? I don't know the exact date. Years. Victoria looked at her for a moment. Then, in a voice slightly louder than the conversation required, she said, We've had items reported missing from the floor this morning. Aisha heard the tone before she caught the words. I haven't touched anything, she said. I'm not making an accusation. Victoria's expression was composed in the way of someone already several steps ahead. Standard protocol when there's a report. She was already looking to her right, and in the space of what looked like a natural movement, an arm crossing the counter's edge to retrieve something, her fingers loosened, and a small white receipt slipped free. It turned once in the air and settled on the floor, 3 inches from Aisha's bag. Elena saw the fingers. She saw the angle. She saw the exact point of release. The receipt had not caught on anything. It had not been blown by a draft. Victoria's hand had been open, angled downward, positioned with a precision that had nothing accidental about it. Elena saw Victoria's eyes move immediately to Roy. One look, practiced and brief. Roy was already moving. Ma'am? His voice was flat and professional. I need you to open your bag. Aisha turned. I'm sorry? Open your bag, please. Standard security check. I didn't take anything. Open the bag, or I escalate this to the district supervisor. The lobby had gone quiet. The attentive quiet of a room that has sensed something shift and is waiting to see what shape it takes. People who had been mid-transaction turned slowly. A woman near the window lowered her phone from her ear. The teenage boy by the brochure rack stopped pretending to read. Aisha set her bag on the counter. Roy opened it. What came out? One worn-down tube of chapstick. A bus pass. The color-coded notebook. A travel pack of baby wipes. 3 diner receipts clipped together. The orange electric bill. And a folded sheet of paper. Lily's drawing pressed into Aisha's bag that morning. A crayon house. A too large yellow sun. A figure with oversized hands labeled in careful, uneven letters. Mommy. It went onto the marble counter alongside everything else. There it all was. The entire visible inventory of Aisha Thompson's life, spread out on the polished surface of a bank that charged $20 a month for the privilege of keeping your money in it. Every item small, every item ordinary. Every item placed under a kind of scrutiny that made it seem like evidence of something, though no one could have said exactly what. Victoria surveyed the row of items with an expression of theatrical regret. She pointed to the receipt on the floor. That appears to be a security voucher from our safe deposit area. Clients are not permitted to remove those. I didn't take it, Aisha said. It fell from your side of the counter. I'm sure it did, Victoria said. A man near the window gathered his things and left. On his way out, he gave Victoria a small, affirming nod, the kind that said, Thank you for handling that. Elena's hands rested on her keyboard. She was not typing. She was looking at the receipt on the floor, then at the position of Aisha's bag, then at the angle of Victoria's hand from 30 seconds ago. She ran the geometry of it again in her mind. She ran it a second time. She knew exactly what she had seen. She pressed her lips together. Her mortgage was due in 11 days. Her son had a college application that needed a counselor's signature, and the counselor charged $400. She had 2 weeks of paid leave left for the year. She said nothing. Aisha reached slowly toward Lily's drawing. Please don't touch anything until this is resolved, Victoria said. Aisha's hand stopped in the air. The drawing sat on the marble, one corner lifting on its own in the recycled air of the lobby. The word, Mommy, faced the ceiling of First Meridian Bank. The hallway behind the teller stations was narrow and fluorescent, the behind-the-scenes face of everything the lobby pretended not to be. Victoria opened the conference room door without quite holding it, and Aisha walked in. A table, 2 chairs, a clock on the wall reading 10:02, a fake plant on a low shelf with a thin layer of dust on its plastic leaves. Victoria sat. Aisha sat across from her. The room had no windows. The overhead light had the particular flatness of fluorescent tubes at full brightness. No shadow, no warmth, nowhere to rest your eyes. Aisha pressed her palms flat on the table and focused on staying very still, because stillness was the only thing she had full control over right now. "What I have here," Victoria said, "is a pattern. An account flagged for restricted access, a restricted area voucher found near your belongings, no documentation verifying your relationship to this account beyond a form letter." She folded her hands. "This is, at minimum, a matter of potential theft, and depending on the account structure, it may constitute fraud." "I haven't committed fraud," Aisha said. "I came in to check my balance." "And the voucher?" "I didn't take it. It fell from the counter. That would require corroboration." Victoria picked up a pen. "I'll need your full legal name, your social security number, and your current address." Aisha gave them. All three. Steady. Victoria typed them in. The screen loaded. A white field, then a red-bordered box in the center. "Access denied. Security clearance required." Victoria stared at it. "What does that mean?" Aisha asked. "It means the account is restricted at a level I cannot access here." Victoria's voice slowed, acquiring the measured certainty of someone who had found what they were looking for. Accounts carrying that security classification are typically linked to frozen assets, pending legal investigations, or fraudulent establishment. She looked at Aisha across the table. "I'm sure you understand the conclusion I have to draw." "I'm sure you can think of other explanations," Aisha said. Victoria picked up the phone. "Yes," she said into the receiver. "This is Victoria Hargrove, Branch 14. We may need officers at this location, within the hour, if possible." She set the phone down. "You'll want to stay in this room." She gathered Aisha's documents from the table, the bank letter, the inquiry form, and moved them to her side. Then her eyes settled on Aisha's collarbone. Personal valuables should be placed on the table during an active investigation. Aisha's hand went to the chain. "This was my mother's." "I understand. It's protocol." "I'm not taking it off." Victoria made a note and said nothing further. There was a silence then that had texture to it. Aisha could hear the hum of the building's ventilation. She could hear, faintly, the lobby sounds from beyond the closed door. A transaction completed, a printer running, someone's phone on low volume. Life continuing in the ordinary direction, 12 feet away, behind a wall she had not chosen to be on the wrong side of. She thought about Lily. Not the call, not the quarter. Earlier than that. This morning, before 7, when Lily had stood at the bathroom sink in her pajamas, brushing her teeth with full concentration, the way she did everything, and had looked up at the mirror and said, around the toothbrush, "You look pretty today, Mommy." Aisha had been wearing this same hoodie, this same bleach-spotted jeans. Lily had meant it completely. She held on to that. When Victoria walked Aisha back into the lobby a few minutes later, past 10:15, the morning rush had crested. 14 or 15 people occupied the space, some in line, some simply present, all of them orienting themselves the way crowds do when something is happening. Roy placed Aisha near the entrance, to the left of the rope line. Aisha felt her phone buzz in her pocket. Then again. Roy was 3 feet away. She couldn't answer. Then the screen unlocked on its own. The notification setting she'd never managed to fix, and Lily's voice message played without headphones, without warning, in the middle of a banking lobby on a Tuesday morning. "Mommy, did you do something wrong? The lady at school said you didn't call. I'm waiting outside." 5 years old. Small and confused, and frightened in the way children are frightened when they don't understand what's wrong but know exactly that something is. The lobby held completely still. Nobody moved. The voice faded. The screen went dark. Aisha looked at the officer standing in the doorway. He had arrived exactly when Victoria said he would. She looked at him and said very calmly, My daughter is waiting outside her school. Whatever you need from me, I will fully cooperate. But someone needs to call her school." Roy looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at the clock on the wall. She said nothing. In that lobby, with Lily's voice still settling somewhere in the air, with every person in the room looking at Victoria Hargrove, she said absolutely nothing. And that silence was the loudest thing in the room. 2 officers came through the main doors at 10:17. One was mid-40s, unhurried, his stride steady, the walk of someone who had stopped assuming calls were straightforward. The other was younger, clipboard already out, scanning the lobby. Victoria met them at the entrance and briefed them for about 90 seconds in the kind of low, continuous voice that sounds thorough but is actually curated. The older officer nodded twice. They turned and walked toward Aisha. The lobby had filled the way lobbies fill when something is happening that people would prefer to believe they're not watching. Near the water dispenser, a woman in scrubs had gone still. 2 men who had been in conversation had stopped. Near the east window, 3 people had found reasons to linger. It had the quality of an event. The older officer stopped 2 feet from Aisha. "Ma'am, Officer Desmond, I've been asked to stay on site while this matter is reviewed. Please remain here and cooperate." "I understand," Aisha said. "I haven't done anything wrong." "I hear you. We just need to sort this out." From across the lobby, at the desk near the east wall, a voice broke loose. "She didn't do anything." Tyler Marsh was standing. He was not tall and not imposing, and his voice carried the slight unsteadiness of someone who was nervous and talking anyway. He addressed the officers, not Victoria. "I watched what happened at the counter. The receipt didn't come from her bag. It fell from Victoria's side. I saw it leave her hand." Victoria turned. "Tyler?" Her voice was precisely controlled. "You are not a witness in this matter. Return to your desk." "I was right there." "Tyler." Colder now. "If you do not return to your desk this moment, your internship ends today. Not at the close of business. Right now." She held the pause. "Is that what you want?" The lobby held its breath. Tyler looked at Aisha. Aisha looked back at him. She gave him nothing. No nod, no plea, no expression asking him to keep going. She looked at him the way her mother had taught her to look at things that frightened her. Straight on, without flinching. He was 23 years old, with a student loan and 4 months of experience, and Victoria Hargrove staring at him from 15 feet away. He had every reasonable, practical, self-interested reason in the world to sit back down. He didn't. "I have the time and the full sequence documented in my notes," Tyler said. "I've already written it down." "Leave the building," Victoria said. He walked to the ATM vestibule by the entrance and sat on the bench there. He did not leave. He took out his phone and kept recording. Aisha stood between the 2 officers. Desmond's partner had moved to her left. They were not aggressive, not unkind, but they had positioned themselves on either side with the quiet efficiency of people who do this regularly, and that efficiency was its own message. Her arms were at her sides, free, but the next step was already decided by everyone in the room except her. She was shaking. Not her face. Her face was still. But her hands, pressed flat against her thighs, trembled the way hands tremble when you have spent everything you have on staying upright and there is almost nothing remaining. She was thinking about the notebook, the color-coded one, sitting on the side counter where Roy had placed her things. Red for overdue, yellow for due, green for paid. She had filled it line by line for 3 years. Every shift, every dollar, every calculation made at a kitchen table after Lily was in bed, in the yellow lamplight of a studio apartment where the radiator knocked and the walls were thin. She had never once missed a payment without calling first. She had never once borrowed money she did not intend to return. She had constructed her life piece by careful piece with the materials available to her. and none of those materials had ever included the benefit of anyone's doubt. "There's a mistake," she said. Her voice barely wavered. "Please, check the account again." Officer Desmond looked at her. "Ma'am, we've been advised the account carries a security restriction." "I know it does. A restriction is not the same as fraud." She held his gaze. "Please look at it again. That's all I'm asking." He glanced at his partner. He glanced at Victoria, standing near the counter, arms crossed, with the expression of someone watching a formality reach its natural end. Nobody spoke. In the vestibule, Tyler opened his messages and found a journalist he'd followed online for 2 years. He attached the footage he'd been recording since 9:45 that morning. He typed 4 words. "Watch this, right now." He sent it. Then Aisha felt 2 short buzzes from her pocket. Marcus. His signal. She pressed her eyes shut for 1 full second. Then she opened them, drew herself up, and addressed Officer Desmond directly. "I would like to formally request a district-level review of this account before any action is taken. I am entitled to make that request." The officer looked at her for a long moment. "Yes," he said. "You are." Marcus Reed came through the glass doors at 10:43. He was not dressed for drama. He wore a charcoal overcoat and a white Oxford with no tie, the clothes of a man who did not need to announce himself. He carried a leather portfolio. He swept the room in one long look. Officers, Aisha near the entrance, Victoria at the counter, Elena 3 feet back, Tyler in the vestibule, and walked directly to Officer Desmond. "Marcus Reed." He produced a card. "Legal representative for the account holder and counsel for the property trust that holds ownership of this building." Officer Desmond looked at the card. "This building," the officer said. "This building," Marcus confirmed. He opened the portfolio and laid 2 documents on the counter, a corporate filing with a raised seal and a 1-page legal summary. "Before any action is taken or any report filed, I need access to this account at district clearance level. Right now." The officer read both documents. He read them carefully. Victoria had gone still at the end of the counter. Her arms were crossed, her pin was straight, her blazer was buttoned, everything in its correct position. But her hands gripped her own forearms beneath her crossed arms, slowly, tightly, the only thing she still controlled. Gerald Porter emerged from the back office the way men emerge when a situation has finally become unavoidable. He sat at the primary terminal, entered his override credentials, and accessed the account at district level. The red box disappeared. What replaced it was a name and a number. Gerald read the number once, then read it again. He turned in his chair and looked at Marcus Reed. Marcus said nothing. Gerald rotated the monitor and brought it to the counter's edge so Aisha could see. She stood very still and read the screen. Diane Thompson's trust, funded over 20 years through quiet, patient investment decisions managed by Marcus with the steadiness of someone who took the longest possible view, was not a modest account. It was the accumulated labor of a woman who had worked 2 jobs in silence and directed what remained, year after year, into something her daughter would find when she needed it most. A founding trust account. 20 years of compounding. Not a number that belonged in the same sentence as lavender spray and a sidestep. The kind of number that changed the shape of a room. Aisha placed both hands flat on the counter's edge. She thought in that moment of a specific afternoon when she was 11 years old. Her mother had come home from a double shift, still in her work clothes, and had sat at the kitchen table with a small envelope and a pen and worked through something in silence for nearly an hour. Aisha had been doing homework at the other end of the table and had not asked what it was. She had only watched, from the corner of her eye, the careful way her mother's hand moved across the envelope. Deliberate, unhurried, like someone building something one small line at a time. She had not known what she was watching. She knew now. She did not make a sound. Elena Vargas stepped out from behind the teller station. She walked to the terminal, leaned slightly toward the screen, and read from it. Her voice shook once, then steadied, and carried across the lobby with the clarity of someone who had been quiet for too long and had made a final decision about it. This is a founding trust account. She looked up. She looked at Victoria. She looked at the officers. Ownership level. No one spoke. Marcus turned to face the room. She is the sole beneficiary, he said. He said it without ceremony, without theater, with only the weight of the words themselves, which was more than enough. The lobby released a breath it had been holding for nearly 2 hours. Aisha stood at the counter in worn-out shoes and a faded hoodie. For the first time all morning, she stood straight without having to think about it, her shoulders released from where they had been held since she walked through the doors. She lifted her head and looked at the room the way a person looks at a room when they no longer need anything from it. The man in the delivery jacket, the one who had been in line since before Aisha arrived, the one who had watched all of it, raised his phone. He pointed it at Victoria. "You owe her an apology," he said. He said it the way people say things that are simply, undeniably true. No anger, no performance. Just the flat certainty of a man who was done watching something wrong happen in a room he was standing in. He said it again, louder. "You owe her an apology." Other phones rose around the lobby. Every person in that space felt it shift. In the chest, in the stomach, wherever the body registers that something just changed. Gerald Porter turned from the terminal and looked at Victoria Hargrove for a long time without speaking. Victoria met his eyes. Then she stopped. "Victoria." His voice was the quietest it had been all morning. "I need you to explain what happened today." The lobby was full. 15, maybe 18 people, all of them facing forward now. No one pretended to examine brochures or check their phones. The woman in scrubs had moved 3 steps closer from the water dispenser. The men near the window had turned completely from it. Victoria straightened her blazer. "There was a reported theft." Elena stepped forward and placed a printed sheet on Gerald's desk. A security footage log, a transaction record, a typed 2-page statement she had written in her car and printed 8 minutes ago. Her voice was steady. "The receipt fell from her side of the counter. I was standing 3 feet away. It did not come from her bag." She looked at Victoria. "I will put that on any record you require." Gerald reviewed the sheet. He looked at the camera in the upper right corner of the lobby ceiling. He looked at Victoria. Marcus took 1 step forward. "Apologize to her," he said. He said it simply, from a few feet back, portfolio closed, with the particular calm of a man whose voice did not need volume because the room was already listening. A beat of silence. From the back of the lobby, the man in the delivery jacket said it flat and clear. "Say it properly." A woman near the rope line crossed her arms. The teenager by the entrance leveled his phone. Tyler walked in from the ATM vestibule and stood near the door, his own footage backed up in 3 places and already out in the world. Victoria looked at the room. She looked at the phones. She looked at Aisha Thompson, standing at the counter in worn-out shoes and a faded hoodie, back straight, hands at her sides, not waiting for anything, not performing anything, just present. The same way she had been present since the moment she walked through the glass doors with an electric bill and a balance inquiry form, and a daughter asking if the lights were getting shut off tonight. Victoria's hands were trembling. Her eyes moved to the side counter, where Roy had placed Aisha's belongings after the bag search. The chapstick, the bus pass, the notebook, the baby wipes, the diner receipts, the electric bill, Lily's drawing, still folded at the corner. Victoria walked to the shelf. She bent down and she picked up each item one by one. The receipts, the bill, the notebook, the drawing, which she folded back with 2 hands as carefully as she could manage. She carried them to the main counter and set them down in front of Aisha, straightening the pile with short, deliberate movements. Then she looked up. "I was wrong about you." Her voice was barely a voice. She looked at Aisha and said it again, because the room required her to mean it. "I treated you unfairly. I'm sorry." The lobby did not erupt. No applause, no dramatic reaction. Only the sound of a room full of people exhaling at the same moment. Quiet, collective, and real. Gerald Porter said 3 words to Victoria. "Pending HR review." She stood. She pushed her chair in. She walked through the glass doors and into the October light and sat in her car for 11 minutes before she started the engine. What she thought about during those 11 minutes belonged only to her. In the lobby, Elena's formal testimony, written, time-stamped, supported by camera footage, was already in the district compliance officer's inbox. The suspension notice reached Victoria's desk before the end of the business day. At his desk in the ATM vestibule, Tyler's 40-second clip had been viewed 11,000 times by noon. By midnight, 60 million. The caption someone wrote beneath it was 4 words. "Her mother built this." The comment appearing most frequently, in 17 languages across 3 continents, was 2. Dignity first. Aisha gathered her things from the counter. The notebook, the bill, the drawing, which she folded once more and returned to her bag. She signed the trust documentation that Judith placed in front of her, unhurried, without commentary, the way things should have been handled from the beginning. She looked at Gerald Porter before she turned to leave. He nodded. She nodded back. She walked across the marble lobby, her left shoe catching the floor once near the door, and pushed through the glass into the October morning. The air outside was cold and sharp and smelled like exhaust and fallen leaves, and the particular freedom of a city that does not stop for anyone. Aisha stood on the sidewalk for a moment with her face tilted slightly upward, eyes closed. The sun was thin but present. Then she took out her phone and called her daughter's school. 3 months later, Aisha Thompson came back. She arrived at 8:52 on a January morning, early enough to stand on the sidewalk and watch the branch lights come on through the glass. The street was quiet at this hour, a delivery truck idling at the corner, a woman walking a dog in a plaid coat, the particular stillness of a city that has not yet decided to begin. Aisha stood with her hands in her pockets and her breath coming out in small, even clouds, and she watched the lights flicker on one section at a time until the whole lobby was lit. She had driven herself. That was still new. The car, a used sedan with high mileage and a heater that worked on the passenger side better than the driver's side, purchased 6 weeks ago in cash. She had sat in the lot of the dealership for 20 minutes after signing the paperwork, just holding the keys. Lily had been in the back seat eating crackers, completely unimpressed, which had made it better somehow. She wore a dark green coat, fitted, real buttons, that she had bought for herself. Her hair was loose. Around her neck, the same thin gold chain, the same small cross. And the shoes, the old black flats, still hers. She had cleaned them, polished them until the worn leather held the light again. The left sole had been re-glued by a cobbler on Maple Street who asked no questions and charged $8. They were not new, they were not expensive, but when she walked through the door that morning, they made no sound at all. Judith held the door open. "Miss Thompson, the conference room is ready." "Thank you," Aisha said. The room had been rearranged. A small pothos plant sat in the center of the table, green, unhurried, genuinely alive. Natural light came through a window that faced the street. Gerald Porter was there, along with a representative from the bank's Community Investment Division and someone from the local school district who had asked to be included after the past 3 months had made it clear that something larger was taking shape. Aisha set her bag on the chair beside her, a canvas one with a zipper that worked, and took a breath before she opened it. She had prepared the folder at the kitchen table 2 nights ago, after Lily was in bed, with the lamp pulled close and the apartment quiet. She had checked everything twice. She had made a list and crossed each item off as she placed it inside, the way her mother had taught her to do things that mattered. Carefully, without rushing, and with both hands. She opened the folder on the table. Inside, paperwork to open a junior savings account in Lily Thompson's name. A framework for a scholarship fund, early stages, for students from Riverfield. A donation agreement with a Southside organization providing interview preparation and professional clothing to adults re-entering the workforce. And one more document. A receipt for 30 pairs of children's shoes, brand new. Purchased from a store 2 blocks from Lily's school, delivered to the school's main office the previous Tuesday, each pair tagged with a small handwritten note. Gerald read it aloud, not for effect, simply because the words seemed too small to remain private. For every kid who ever had to walk somewhere and hoped nobody noticed. Dignity first. He set the paper down. He looked up. Aisha looked back at him. The room was quiet, in the way rooms go quiet when something has just been said that everyone in them will remember. The school district representative had stopped writing. The woman from Community Investment had her pen down, hands folded. Gerald Porter, who had managed numbers and risk assessments and quarterly reviews for 22 years, was looking at Aisha Thompson the way people look at things that have adjusted their understanding of something. "My mother wrote those words," she said. "She put them in my lunchbox every day for 3 years when I was small. I always thought they were just for me." She paused. Turns out there was more room. No one rushed to fill the silence. It didn't need filling. After the meeting, Judith walked Aisha out through the lobby. The marble floor caught the winter light coming through the front glass and scattered it in long, pale lines across the floor. Aisha walked through them the same way she had walked through the chandelier light in October, without looking down, without adjusting her stride. At the door, Judith stops her with a hand briefly on her arm. "I've been here 14 years, Judith said. She didn't say anything else for a moment. "What you did, the shoes for the kids, the fund, people in this building are talking about it." She looked at Aisha directly. "I just wanted you to know." Aisha nodded. "Thank you for how you treated me. That day, and this one." Judith held the door. Aisha walked out into the January light. That afternoon, she picked Lily up from school herself. Lily came running out the front door in new shoes, white sneakers with pink Velcro straps, one already half undone, and threw herself at Aisha's legs without slowing down. She talked all the way home, about a papier-mâché turtle, about a new game at recess, about how her friend Danny had come to school that week with a hole in the side of her shoe, and so Lily had given her the second pair from the delivery box, the extra ones she'd been keeping by the door. Aisha stopped walking. "You gave Danny your shoes?" Lily nodded, entirely serious. "She needed them more. You always say dignity first." She thought about it for a moment. "I think that's what it means." Aisha stood on the sidewalk and looked at her daughter. 5 years old. Pink Velcro strap half open. Braids loosening at the edges, the same as always. Looking up at her mother with the calm certainty of someone who had simply done what made sense and could not understand why it required discussion. Aisha thought about her mother standing at the stove on a Thursday evening, making rice like nothing had changed. She thought about 37 folded squares of paper in a shoebox under a bed. She thought about a woman sitting at a kitchen table with an envelope and a pen, building something in silence, one careful line at a time. She crouched down to Lily's level and fastened the loose Velcro strap. She pressed it flat, twice, the way it needed to be done. "Yeah," she said quietly. "That's exactly what it means." Then she started walking again, and she kept Lily's hand in hers and did not let go the entire way home. They stopped at the corner store and bought milk, not because it was the only thing they could afford, but because Lily had asked, and Aisha could now say yes simply because she felt like it. That was still the part that caught her off guard sometimes, not the number on the screen. The feeling of having a yes that cost her nothing. That evening, after dinner, a real dinner, Pasta with the sauce Lily liked, eaten at the table with the overhead light on instead of the lamp because the electric bill was green now. Lily asked to call Marcus. Aisha handed her the phone. Lily held it with both hands and said, very seriously, into the screen, "Uncle Marcus, I gave my friend shoes today." There was a pause. Then Marcus's voice, warm and low. "That right? Because Mommy always says dignity first." Lily nodded at the phone. "And I'm going to keep saying it too." Another pause. "Good," Marcus said. And then, softer, the kind of word that carries more than it shows. "Your grandmother would have liked you very much, Lily." Lily said, "I know. Mommy tells me stuff about her." She handed the phone back and went to find her crayons. After Lily was in bed, Aisha sat at the kitchen table. The notebook was there, old, color-coded, almost entirely green now. She opened the drawer beside her and took out her mother's journal. Small and soft-covered, worn at the spine. She had found it in December and had been reading it slowly, a few pages at a time. Because some things you do not want to finish. She opened it to the last entry. At the top, in Diane's round, careful handwriting, "For my strong girl, dignity first." Below it, written on a different day in a different pen, "Build something they can't take from you." Aisha ran her thumb along the second line. She had thought, when she first read it, that her mother meant the money, the trust, the investment, the number on the screen that had changed the shape of a room on a Tuesday in October. But sitting here now, in the kitchen that was paid for and warm, with her daughter asleep in the next room and a folder full of paperwork on the counter for things she was just beginning to build, she thought maybe her mother had meant something larger than the money, something the money was just the foundation of. You can build a house on a foundation, or you can build a neighborhood, or you can teach a 5-year-old what it means to walk into a room and leave something better than you found it. She closed the journal. She turned to the blank pages at the back of her own notebook and picked up a pen. One sentence. For when Lily was old enough to read it. You come from women who built things quietly. You don't have to be quiet, but you should know the building is already started. She closed the notebook. She turned off the kitchen light. She went to bed. She slept.